No Jania style.
No Jania style. All right, fine. No Jania style. We do it short
Jania
and
style
sweet.
is saved for the end of the lesson.
All right. The second
Jania
part of the
style is
lesson.
dope.
The second part of the message was just so simple. Is Yahuwah? He decides everything. We should just obey. So his time, his reasoning, his ways, he decides everything. His steps, everything is decided upon Yahuwah. If he decides he wants spring to last 20 days, he needs to do that. All we have to do is follow the law, statutes, commandments, seek him with an open heart and truth and in spirit, and obey his words. That's it.
That's absolutely all it is. And it's very simple. It's a very simple concept in everything that we do. That's in, like Gary said, when Gary started off, he started off with the scripture, the steps of a righteous man or the steps of a good man are ordered by the Most High. Like, so in everything, in all of our planning and everything that we do, the Most High is the one that orders our steps. And he's the one that puts all of these things in place. So it's the same, because that goes for everything, not just how you work, not just where you work, not just your finances, not just what you eat or what you wear. No, it applies to everything. It applies to absolutely everything in our lives, everything that we deal with, everything that we come in contact with. The Most High orders those steps. He orders that path. So the calendar and the seasons and the times are not excluded from that. When he brings the seasons in, all we have to do is observe the clock and observe the signs that he put up before us. That's it. When it's time for his feast days, they come in there in his appointed time when he brings them. All we have to do is observe what he said to observe, and we'll know exactly where we are. So while the majority of the lesson, or the overarching theme of the lesson was following the calendar, the underlying concept or the underlying meaning was just be obedient. We are not smart enough to be able to calculate the things that the Most High can calculate. That's why he made it all visual for us. Look at the moon, look at the sun, look at the stars, and you can find it. You'll be able to find your way. I'm giving you the signs. So Jania was absolutely right. The second thing that we were supposed to go over, and I think we missed it, was Matthew chapter 16, verses 5 through 12.
That was homework.
That was homework. Okay. And what I asked you guys was to meditate on that and read through that and see what kind of revelation Most High would give to you. So would anyone like to share what they got from it? Now, Jania, if you want to go Jania style on this is perfect. Just by all means, go for it. So would anyone like to share what they got from those verses?
Kelly, can you read the verses?
Absolutely. So Matthew chapter 16, starting at verse 5. Excuse me. And when his disciples were come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. Then Jesus said unto them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have taken no bread. Which when Jesus perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith, why reason ye among yourselves, because ye have brought no bread? Do ye not understand? Do ye not yet understand? Neither remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets ye took up? Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many baskets ye took up? How is it that ye do not understand that I spake it not to you concerning bread, that ye should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees? Then understood they how that he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. So what did you guys see happening in these verses? clue? Did I write a clue? I
Can I
did.
give a stab at it?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so the Talmudim, his disciples, were concerned about food, the bread, but the Most High, I'm sorry, but Yahusha wanted them to be more focused on what the Sadducees and the Pharisees, the type of bread that they were, meaning teachings that they were spreading, and that their teachings were not of the Most High, but of what, even though they used the Moses doctrines, they instituted a lot of things that will benefit them. So in
Man,
hindsight, their teachings were leaven to control whatever they needed to control at the time. And Yahusha was trying to get them to understand that, be more concerned what the Talmudim, be more concerned with the Sadducees and the Pharisees are teaching to the people. Don't worry about the bread itself, because that's a substance for the body. He wanted them to be more concerned about the substance for the soul.
good. That was good. That was good. I just want you guys to know that there's no right or wrong answer. I'm not looking for a specific answer. I'm just going to show you what I saw when I read through it, but there is no right or wrong answer. So anyone else like to share what they saw?
So I saw a couple things. So I saw Elder and the parables. But I saw that they were still concerned, the Talmudim was still concerned with what the things that they could see. Because when he spoke in a parable about spiritual bread. What are you eating? And all they saw was the natural bread, what they could see. So the Pharisees and the Sadducees, whatever, the Pharisees and the other ones, the food that they were feeding the people was not the food of the Most High, the word of the Most High, because in the scriptures it says, man does not live on bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of the Most High. So the bread that they were given was not of the food of the Most High, and the leaven in it was poisonous. It killed the spirit because it wasn't feeding the spirit. The man was eating the wrong food. He was reading the wrong word. And sin and leaven just does what leaven does. It grows. Sin upon sin upon sin upon sin. So he was telling the Talmudim to be careful of the words the food that they were eating, the words that they were taking in and digesting, because it will change them it will change what they are supposed to be. No, it'll change their food, it'll change their substance, and they'll become just like them.
That's real good. That's really good. Thank you. Thank you, Torah, for that. Would anyone else like to share?
I would.
Okay.
Well, basically, in a nutshell, the Pharisees and the Sadducees were teaching their doctrine, not the doctrine of Christ. And Christ wanted to let them know that, hey, you better beware what you're doing because you're teaching wrong teaching. And that's not me, basically.
Right. Absolutely.
One more thing, and
Okay.
that we are all Pharisees and Sadducees. Yes.
Ooh.
Yes.
Okay. Would you care to elaborate on that?
That we all are. I can only speak for myself, and I will always speak for myself. I know the things that I see, but I'll always speak for myself. And one thing I cannot say is that I have not been a Pharisees and Sadducees. That's not true, because I have taken in different doctrines that wasn't true. I have ate of different breads that have damaged my spirit, or have brung in different things that have made me do more sin upon sin. So we'll use the one, let's see, marriage before sex is a sin. I grew up knowing that, But somewhere along the line, you started hearing, well, if you don't know what they're like in bed, then before you marry them, then you might be stuck with this, or, you know, this. I ate of some different type of bread. And then I did something different other than what I was taught in the beginning was, you don't do that. That's a sin. So I ate of some different type of bread. I ate something different, and I started to do and move and operate a different way. And then in me doing that, I became like a Pharisees, because then I taught the same thing to somebody else. So we all were Pharisees and Sadducees, if we really want to be honest about it, because we all have done things contrary to what the word says. We have all eaten of a different bread and piled sin upon sin, bread upon bread upon us.
Way to go. Absolutely. Absolutely. I knew exactly where you were going when you said it, but I wanted you to explain it instead of me. So all praises. That was very good. That was very good. Would anyone?
Kelly,
Yes.
I wanted to finish up on mine also.
Okay.
I see that all these churches today are like Sadducees and the Pharisees completely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they teach. They're all teaching wrong teachings to us. All of them are. None of them have the right teachings. So they may as well be the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
Right. Right. You very much so, because that was the problem that Yahushua had with the Pharisees and the Sadducees altogether. He called them hypocrites and brood of vipers. He's like, you teach the law, you teach what we're supposed to, but you don't actually do it. Right. So that's why he told the Israelites and the people at the time, he said, do what they say do, but don't do what they actually do. Because they're teaching you the law, statutes, and commandments and how you're supposed to keep them and how you're supposed to apply it, but they aren't actually doing it. That's why they were hypocrites. So you're absolutely right. Some of these churches, they will read through the Bible, they'll read through the scriptures and show you things, but then they input their own doctrine on top of that without actually going precept upon precept, line upon line. They just give you whatever they feel at the moment. Elder, you were about to say something? If you are saying something, we can't hear you. Okay. So would anyone else like to share? Elder Joseph, if you are talking, we cannot hear you.
I wasn't talking, but
Okay.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm okay. Only thing I would say, because I mean everybody was elaborated, is food is for visitors, but spiritual heritage is for children. So I'll just sum it up in that.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can hear me. So
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
okay.
Yes. This is
So basically,
now we can hear you.
if you're getting the Torah, the instructions as Adam did and all our ancestors did, you become
Elder, you're going in and out. We can't hear you now.
in
And he dropped off. Okay. Essentially, and I don't want there he goes. Essentially what I think the elder was going into is like what Yahushua said to the Canaanite woman when he told her that it is not meat to give the children's bread unto the dogs. Right. And she says, even though the dogs eat from the crumbs of the master's table, like that's perfectly fine. But the point still stands that it is not good for me to give anybody else. It's not meant for me to give you. It's not meat for him to give you the bread of the children, the bread that belongs to the children. And that bread that he's talking about is not this physical bread like the disciples thought it was. He's not talking about physical bread or physical leavening. He's talking about spiritual food. He's talking about the understanding of the word. It's not meant to give that to everybody. That was only meant for the children of Israel. And I think that's where he was going. If there was something else that you were going to bring out, please add into it. Elder? No? Okay. Am I coming in clear? Okay. Okay. So would anyone else like to share what they got from those verses as well? We'll do one more and then I'll give mine. Or we can just go straight into mine. So what I saw in this is we like to put the, and we put the disciples on a pedestal. You know, the Hebrew word talmudim means taught ones or learned ones. And we know that they were taught by Yahusha, right? That goes without saying, they were his disciples. So we tend to put them on a pedestal. Like, you know, these guys were like super wise, and they sat under Yahusha for 3 years and learned and just soaked up all the information. But what we see right here is a candid moment. This is just one of a few, actually, a candid moment where they were all confused. It shows the realness in their journey of them learning. And to me, it's kind of a comforting thing. It's like, it's encouragement. You don't have to start off at the top, like knowing everything. Like, it's okay to have to learn this stuff, even if you have a foundation in the law, statutes, and commandments, because all of the disciples had just that. They all were raised in the law, statutes, and the commandments. They knew the law. They knew how they were supposed to govern themselves. But yet and still, Hamashiach comes up and he just confounds them completely with something simple. They're asking each other, they're like, oh man. Say, in verse 5, it says, and when his disciples would come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. And then in verse 7, it says, and they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have taken no bread. They thought that Yahusha was angry at them, or he was upset or frustrated with them because they didn't take literal bread. They were having a moment where he confounded them by the prophecy, by the parable that he said. These are the taught ones or the learned ones. So when I read through this, it immediately gave me encouragement. Like, it's okay to not know something. It's okay to not be able to explain every deep mystery of the scriptures. Now, this is something that I've always known, and you guys have heard me say this before. If I don't know something, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. But if you give me some time, if the Most High decides that he wants to reveal it to me, we'll go find it. We'll go look it up. But as of right now, I don't know it. I would rather tell you that I don't know than for me to give you my opinion and it be something crazy, far-fetched from it, and it's a lie, because that's even worse. It is okay to say you don't know. And so what we saw, or what I saw right here, is a moment where the disciples just didn't know. They didn't know what Christ was talking about. They're like, dude, like he's upset that we didn't bring bread. And then he comes back. And just like he said that he would do, that the Comforter will show you everything, would reveal all truth to you, just like he said it would happen. He does it. He comes back and he reveals what he was talking about to them. So it was very comforting and encouraging to me. And that was a personal one. It was like, wow. I even wrote it in the scriptures that the disciples had an aha moment. I wrote it down in my notes on the side. It was like, this was something so simple as bread and leaven. He had the disciples, the taught ones, the learned ones, he had them confused and confounded. So y'all ready to jump into the Torah portion? We're gonna go ahead and get there. So we're going from Numbers chapter 9 all the way up to 12 and verse 16. So does anybody have any questions or any points that they would like to stick to or touch on? in this Torah portion? That's better.
The only thing I had was in 12, and it literally correlated to your whole message last week.
Oh,
And it was so interesting because it literally, like, the whole thing just spoke to me. And it was just like, just do what I tell you to do.
yeah. Chapter 12. Okay. Anyone else? I mean, you guys, you already know, y'all can stop me anytime when we get to it if you want. If you have a question, you want to go over something. But I was trying to see if anybody had something they wanted to get to ahead of time. This also helps to let me know that you guys are actually studying. So if not,
Nope, sorry. Oh, and the other thing is that it was like he kept okay, so they were moving, staying, moving, staying, moving, staying. It was like he was teaching them to be obedient. Get up, it's time to move. Sit down, it's time to stay. Get up, it's time to move. Sit down. 40 years of breaking stubbornness.
he was beating obedience into him. It really was. That's how I saw it. The Most High was like, look, nope, you guys, if I let you go too far, you guys go crazy. So I'm gonna force you to stay right here. And I'm just gonna beat this pattern into you. You do what I say do when I say do it. Don't worry about nobody else. And we're actually going to touch on that. Yes, that was a good one. So if nobody else has anything they would like to stop at, we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna jump in.
I did just one thing.
Okay.
In the process of doing what they were doing, as Janine said, because Janine and I talked about it this week, he was also doing the process of the wheats and the tares, because in the process of them, moving so much, there were those who died off.
Yes.
Or either went astray. Yeah.
Yeah, but there were some who were killed off too, and we will.
Yeah, that too.
We're gonna touch that too.
All right.
You want to know what's scary? Because those are your ancestors. And then if one was killed, one made it through, where in the bloodline do we fit in there? And do we have now a chance to keep the laws and do them? And we talking about, just as Yahusha talked to the Talmudim and the people about what's getting ready to happen to us, but we're the results of that. No difference in the midbar, in numbers. So we're talking, because remember in Genesis 15, he said that Abraham's seed will go into captivity. I'm just saying, the seed that came out of Abraham, you talking about going through numbers and all those offsprings that come out of that, and all of them that passed on, that was killed off, and the ones that made it into the promised land is still us. So I just wanted to put that in the back of your hearing. Yield the floor.
Okay, let's dive in. Numbers chapter 9 and verse 1. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, we'll pause right here. Pay attention to something. I want you guys to really pay attention to this. First off, this is the mark of a good leader. And we've touched on this before, that a good leader will continually go to wherever the point of authority is. So even though somebody may be the CEO of a company and they may be at the top of the food chain, they still have somebody that they speak to that gives them advice, that gives them counsel. They still have those people. So a good leader will constantly go before good counsel before they make decisions. And here's another instance where we see the Most High and Moses talking, right? So it wasn't just once or twice. Moses constantly went back and forth before the Most High to get wise counsel from him. Another thing that we see in this verse is this is the first month of the second year after they came out of the land of Egypt. What's a major feast day that happens in the first month?
Passover.
Passover, right? So, but this is the second Passover that's coming up since they left out of Egypt. The first one we know when the Most High came through the firstborn and killed all the firstborn. They were celebrating Passover at that time. That was the first one. Now here we get another one. This is the second one. Now, verse 2. Verse. I want to make sure I don't miss a point. Hold this real quick, and we're going to jump to Exodus chapter 33, verses 8 and 9. Yeah, I got it. Exodus chapter 33, verses 8 and 9. Yeah. So this is some of the times when the Most High and Moses were speaking. Verse 8, and it reads, and it came to pass when Moses went out unto the tabernacle that all the people rose up and stood, every man at his tent door, and looked after Moses until he was gone into the tabernacle. And it came to pass, as Moses entered into the tabernacle, the cloudy pillar descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and Yahweh talked with Moses. So this is Moses again standing in the temple, speaking with the Most High. This is him seeking counsel from the Most High. So we see that, like I said, Moses continually went back and forth to speak to the Most High. Now, what I want you guys to hold on to that from that verse, from 8 and 9, was the cloudy pillar, right? And this is something that Jania touched on about being still, moving when he says move. Take note of the cloudy pillar, the pillar that was there when the Most High spoke to Moses. Now we're going to go to, and somebody don't let me forget. Matter of fact, let's just do it now. Numbers, we're going to go back to Numbers chapter 9 and verse 22. We're going to jump ahead a little bit. So verse 22, and it reads, or whether it were 2 days or a month or a year that the cloud tarried upon the tabernacle, remaining thereon, the children of Israel abode in their tents and journeyed not. But when it was taken up, they journeyed. So during that time that we just saw in Exodus 33, when the pillar came down and spoke to speak to Moses, when the Most High came down in the pillar to speak to Moses, that was during a time when the children of Israel were stationary. That's when they were staying. Because the pillar was there, they stayed. As long as the pillar was there, they didn't move. This is the Most High training them, for lack of a better word, training the children of Israel, right? When I come down to speak, you guys stay still. You stay in your tents. We're going to dwell here. Once I remove that cloud, then you can go on, and I want you to go in the directions that I want you to go. So back to verse 2. It says, let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season. In the 14th day of this month, at even, ye shall keep it in his appointed season. According to all the rites of it, and according to all the ceremonies thereof, shall ye keep it. Who remembers all the rites and all the ceremonies that went into the Passover? Remember, it starts off on the 10th day, you would go and get a lamb. And then on the 14th day at even, you would do what?
You'd kill it and put blood on your door.
Yes. And then you would kill it. You would kill the lamb, you would put the blood on your door, and you would also eat that lamb on the 14th day at even, which is the 15th day, really. So you would then eat that lamb. What's the next part of that ceremony for the feast of, I'm sorry, I almost gave it away, for Passover?
Feast of Unleavened Bread.
There you go. That's the next part of the ceremony. And the Feast of Unleavened Bread lasted how long?
Seven days.
There you go. There you go. So you had the date, the first day, which is Passover, and then you had 7 days of unleavened bread. So these are not all of the ceremonies, because remember, also you had to eat all of the lamb, all of it that you didn't eat, you could not take with you to the next day. You had to burn it with fire. So those are all the ceremonies and all the rites that the Most High gave us to keep the Feast of Passover. Keep that in mind. Also, what we see here in this verse, this is not the first Passover, this is the second one. The Most High is reminding Moses again to keep the Passover. I'm not 100% sure why, because I don't think that Moses would have forgotten something as important as the Passover, because remember, it was supposed to be a memorial, a time to remember when the Most High literally, when the death angel passed over the children of Israel to kill the firstborn of the Egyptians. I don't believe that Moses would have forgotten this in just a year's time. I don't believe any of the children of Israel would have forgotten that in just a year's time. But here we see that the Most High is reminding Moses again for the children of Israel to keep the Passover. So let's continue on. Verse 4. And Moses spoke unto the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover. And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at even in the wilderness of Sinai. According to all that Yahuwah commanded Moses, so did the children of Israel. And there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day. And those men said unto him, we are defiled by the dead body of a man. Wherefore are we kept back, that we may not offer an offering unto Yahuwah in his appointed season among the children of Israel? And Moses said unto them, stand still, and I will hear what Yahuwah will command concerning you. That right there is in itself is an awesome statement in verse 8.
Stand still.
They brought their issue to Moses, because this is a big issue. These brothers right here know that they are supposed to keep the Passover. It's one of the most holiest feast days. They know that they're supposed to keep that, and they have an earnest desire to keep that, but they know that they have defiled themselves. So they're like, Moses, what are we supposed to do? All right, we can't keep the Passover, but we want to, but we had to do our job. What are we supposed to do? Moses just tell them, just stand still, hold fast. Let me inquire of the Most High. Again, Moses showing you the mark of a good leader. He doesn't just give them a judgment on something that he's not 100% sure on. He goes to the Most High first. Verse 9. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if any man of you or your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey afar off, yet he shall keep the Passover unto Yahuwah. The 14th day of the second month at even they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it unto the morning, nor break any bone of it. According to all the ordinances of the Passover, they shall keep it. But the man that is clean and is not in a journey, and forbear to keep the Passover, even the same soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he brought not the offering of Yahuwah in his appointed season. That man shall bear his sin. So the leeway that the Most High just gave Moses to give not just these men, but to the children of Israel at all, if at any point during the time of the Passover you become defiled, right? So not any time during the Passover, but before the Passover, if you become defiled, and we read through this in the book of Leviticus, that if they come near a dead body, or if they touch a dead body, or a family member, or anything like that, they are now defiled, and they are defiled until the even. They have to wash their clothes and everything. If that even happens to be the Passover, then those who defile themselves cannot celebrate or cannot partake in the Passover. So what the Most High just did was gave them a way out. Not a way out, but he gave them, this is basically grace, saying that you can keep the Passover in the next month. The 14th day of the second month, you can keep the Passover. And then subsequently, we're talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread as well. But the man that is not unclean, but the man that is clean, the person who has not defiled himself or herself, and you still don't keep the Passover, the Most High says that you have to bear your sin. That sin is of not celebrating the Passover. How does that apply to us now? This is why last week's lesson was so important. It's just be obedient to the Most High. Just follow the Most High's law, statutes, commandments. If he gives you a sign, if he gives you a time, and you're supposed to celebrate the feast days in his appointed time, what happens if you try to celebrate the Sabbath on a Wednesday? Is that the Sabbath at all?
No.
That's not the Sabbath. So you're not celebrating the Sabbath. What happens if you try to celebrate the Feast of Dedication in June?
It's not.
That's not the Feast of Dedication. So you're not celebrating the feast days that the Most High set forth in their appointed times and in their appointed seasons. So if you are celebrating, and in this one in specific, if you are celebrating the Passover at the wrong time, you're not celebrating the Passover. And what is required of you is that you have to bear that sin. Now you have to give a sin offering and a peace offering and a sacrifice to the Most High. For us now, we have to repent for not keeping his feast day. That's a feast day that we missed. So if you are not celebrating it in the appropriate time, you're not celebrating it. As much as you may want to, that's not the appropriate time. So you now have put yourself at odds with the Most High. Everybody see that? So verse 14. And if a stranger, before we do that, highlight verses 10, 11, and 12, and also 6, 7. We're going to come back to those. So verse 14. And if a stranger shall sojourn among you and will keep the Passover unto Yahweh, according to the ordinance of the Passover, and according to the manner thereof, so shall he do. Ye shall have one ordinance both for the stranger and for him that was born in the land. Now, right here in verse 14, the Most High does something that's really amazing. He shows us what it is, what a stranger is, according to him. So he's going to give us basically a juxtaposition. At the end of the verse, it says, ye shall have one ordinance for both for the stranger and for him that was born in the land. So if that's the case, and we're contrasting two different peoples, a stranger is just someone who was not born in the land. But not just any person. Because remember, this person can celebrate the Passover. So this particular stranger is someone who is able to celebrate the Passover. And the Passover was meant for who? The children of Israel. So this person, this stranger, is an Israelite that was not born in the land. What does that mean? What kind of Israelite is not born in the land? Let's go to Exodus chapter 12, verse 43. And then also we're going to read 48. So Exodus chapter 12, verse 43 and verse 48. And it reads, and Yahuwah said unto Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall no stranger eat thereof. Right? So we're talking about a stranger. This is a different kind of stranger. We've kind of gone through this before. This particular stranger is not an Israelite. They cannot just eat whatever. So this is that kind of stranger. Verse 48. And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee and will keep the Passover to Yahuwah, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born in the land. For no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. So this stranger, even though it's just a couple verses later, this stranger is one that was not born in the land, but he's still an Israelite. So he is able to keep the Passover. That's why one of the points of one of the caveat or prerequisites for this stranger to be able to eat the Passover is that he has to be what? Circumcised. Thank you, Celise. I can read your lips. He has to be circumcised. Why does this person or this stranger have to be circumcised?
Wasn't the only one circumcised was Israelites?
That's what it was. It not only, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that only the Israelites are circumcised, because we see later on in history that there were some Romans or some Greeks who they did the same thing. They thought it was cool. They actually tried to undo the process, which is something weird and gross. But that's something that we saw other cultures doing as well. But not only that it was us, but it was a requirement for us. Remember, when a male child is born on the 8th day, he has to be circumcised. We see that during the time of Abraham. He circumcised Isaac on the 8th day. We saw also that with Moses and his son, Moses almost got killed for it because he did not circumcise his son on the 8th day. His wife did. That's what had his life spared. So it was a requirement, or it is a requirement for the men of the children of Israel to be circumcised. Go ahead, Celise.
So, a question that I've heard asked, and I'm kind of curious about myself, is what if a person who is keeping the law, statutes, and commandments as an adult, but isn't circumcised, wants to keep the Passover? Are they still required to be circumcised even as an adult, or is this just something like for their children that comes after them?
So this is kind of harsh, but think about when Abraham first turned his life over to the law, statutes, and commandments, when he became the friend of Elohim, as he's called. What did he do when he first turned his life over?
He had to be circumcised.
He had to be circumcised. Abraham was how old? He was in his 90s. He was in his 90s. Abraham was actually closer to 100 than he was 90. So this was in his full-grown, I'm an adult man years, and he circumcised himself. But not only did he circumcise himself, but he circumcised all the male servants that he had. All of them weren't children. Matter of fact, the only child that they mentioned was Ishmael. So he circumcised himself, very bold man, Ishmael, and all his male servants. So if these are to be our examples, then yes, you still have to get it done. From experience, it is not a pleasure. It is not a pleasure. I did it when I was 34. Yeah. So for any man who is not, and you want to take this leap, how else do you make a covenant with the Most High? It has to be made in what? Blood. So yes. Now, on top of that, when you get into like the book of Romans, it tells you to be circumcised in heart and in ears. But those are things that you cannot physically circumcise your heart. You cannot circumcise your ear. I don't know what, like, yes. I don't know exactly if anybody has even ever tried that, to circumcise their ears. But it just, in the spiritual aspect, it means to have your heart being your mind, right? It means having your mind and your ears cleansed in a way where you are ready to listen and to understand what the Most High is giving to you. So yes, spiritually you have to do that, but also physically you have to be circumcised in your members. Hang on one second. I'm gonna pause. Okay. So did that answer your question? So a lot of this walk is not for the faint of heart. It really isn't, right? The walk is only for those who will endure, not to the middle, not to the beginning, but you have to endure until the end, right? So you're gonna go through things. You're gonna have to do things to chastise and to kill your flesh in a way all the time, every day. Like Paul said, I die daily, right? So one of the things that, as a man, one of the things that you have to do is you have to show the Most High that you're serious, right? It's one thing to just say it. It's one thing to just, all right, you got on fringes, At any moment, you can take those fringes also, and you've lost nothing, a shirt, whatever. At any moment, you can, for a sister, you can stop wearing dresses and go back to wearing pants, and you've lost nothing, right? But when you show the Most High that you're serious, like I am willing to make a blood covenant with you and sacrificing my own flesh, my own body for it, that shows the Most High that, okay, you're serious. That's something you can't undo. Like I said before, the Romans and the Greeks, they tried to undo the process, but I don't know to what success, and it just sounds weird to even read about it. But it's something that you can't undo, right? These are things that the Most High is like, okay, if you want to show me that you really love me, well, then keep my commandments. One of my commandments is my sons have to be circumcised on the 8th day. All right, well, I'm a lot older than 8 days. What can I do? I didn't say you couldn't do it after that. So it's those kind of things. You make that decision, even though this is just an outward example of an internal decision that you've made. It's still something that you have to do as a man. Now, for sisters, you guys don't circumcise your members that way. For you guys, it comes through in your worship and in through your obedience, right? Unto your fathers, your husbands, and to the Most High, and to Christ, and things like that. So that's how you guys are circumcised, in heart and in ears. But for men, we have to physically go through that process. Yes, where do we stop? 14. Yeah, we were in Exodus 12:43. And let's go to, yes, so we did it. 43 and 48, yes. So that's the difference between the strangers. And the Most High gives us a definition in Numbers 9 and 14. He shows you that a stranger is not just persons of another nation. It's this specific kind of stranger is an Israelite that is just not born in the land. And when you think about like during the time, you see it in Second Kings, First Chronicles, when the children of Israel on their way to the land of Canaan, they lived in Moab. They dwelled in the plains of Moab, and they dwelled there for a long time on their way to Canaan. And they were still having children. Matter of fact, the account reads in, I believe it's Second Kings. It says that it was so many of them that you couldn't see the earth. It was so many Israelites at that time, like you couldn't see the earth. Like that's a lot of people. Like think the Million Man March times 1,000. Like that's a lot of people to the point where you can't see the earth in whatever area that they're in. That's a lot of people. So the children of Israel, they lived in the land of Moab, and they were still producing children. So those children that were born in Moab, had they come back to Jerusalem to keep the Passover, they will be considered strangers because they weren't born in the land of Jerusalem. They weren't born in Israel. They were born in Moab. Similar to a prime example is Ruth. The Bible calls her, says that she was a Moabite woman. That just means she was born in the land of Moab. That's where she lived. So when Naomi wanted to take her back to Jerusalem, to her homeland, she was like, well, I don't know your people, but I'm willing to go wherever you go. I don't know your God. I don't know your judge. So I'm willing to go with you, though. I'm gonna go wherever you go, because she would be a stranger in Jerusalem. Verse 9 and verse 15. And on the day that the tabernacle was reared up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, namely the tent of the testimony. And at even there was upon the tabernacle, as it were, the appearance of fire until the morning. So it was always the cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. And when the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, then after that the children of Israel journeyed. And in the place where the cloud abode, there the children of Israel pitched their tents. So again, like Jania was saying, wherever the cloud stayed, so did the children of Israel. When the cloud moved, the children of Israel moved. Verse 18. At the commandment of Yahuwah, the children of Israel journeyed, and at the commandment of the Lord, they pitched. As long as the cloud abode upon the tabernacle, they rested in their tents. And when the cloud tarried long upon the tabernacle, many days, then the children of Israel kept the charge of the Lord and journeyed not. And so it was, When the cloud was a few days upon the tabernacle, according to the commandment of Yahuwah, they abode in their tents. And according to the commandment of Yahuwah, they journeyed. And so it was when the cloud abode from even unto the morning, and that the cloud was taken up in the morning, then they journeyed, whether it was by day or by night, that the cloud was taken up, they journeyed. So this is the Most High training the children of Israel. I want you to go when I say go, and I want you to stay when I say stay, period and point blank. No, it doesn't matter anybody else, doesn't matter what's going on around you, none of that. I want you to do exactly what I tell you to do. That's why it says narrow is the path that leads to righteousness. You're not supposed to look to the left or to the right. You're supposed to follow exactly what I'm telling you to do. Verse 22. Yeah. Or whether it were 2 days or a month or a year that the cloud tarried upon the tabernacle, remaining thereon, the children of Israel abode in their tents and journeyed not. But when it was taken up, they journeyed. So this is something, this is just a interesting side note that I saw when I was reading this. How long did the children of Israel wander in the wilderness?
40 years.
It was 40 years. Was the Most High with them the whole time or just some of the time?
All the time.
He was with them the whole time. So they weren't, so people like to say the children of Israel wandered in the desert for 40 years because the Most High just left them there. Just begun that he was angry at them, he was pissed, and he said, just go. You're going to wander out there until this generation, this entire first generation dies off. But that is not what happened. The Most High stayed there with them the whole time. It took them so long. They weren't just out there meandering around, taking this long, crazy path, going all the way across Moab, then come back across Moab, go across Edom, and then come back. No, it wasn't like that. He would just literally stop them. And you see in verse 22, for a year at a time. Just stop. We're going to stay right here for a year. Or we're going to stay right here for a month. Or we're going to stay right here for 4 months. So he was taking them on that 11-day journey. He took them straight there. They had to go, there was a path that he had for them specifically to avoid some of the different nations of people that were there, like the Philistines. He did do that, but they weren't wandering like they were lost because they didn't know where they were going. No, the Most High led them straight to Canaan, like he said he would. But the problem is, he would make them stop for long stretches of time. Some, as you see, they wandered out there for 40 years. So some of those times that they stopped, it was for years at a time. That they would literally just stop and just stay in a place. Because the Most High was dealing with them on certain issues. Like, you guys, y'all still not learning. You want to do up here and bring a calf out. What are y'all thinking about? You're not thinking. So we're going to stop and we're going to stay here for a while. You guys are still out here complaining and backbiting and murmuring. We're going to get to it later on, where the Most High, where they were complaining about manna. And the Most High caused serpents to come out and bite the children of Israel. That's in Numbers chapter 21. They complain. So every time they would complain, the Most High would just stop. Like, nope, I'm going to come down. I'm going to talk to Moses. I'm going to talk to Aaron. And we're going to stay right here until y'all get it together. And literally, that's what he was doing. So it wasn't that they were literally lost and they did not know, and the Most High just took them a roundabout way. No, he took them in the direct path that he said he would, but he just would, whenever he felt like it, just stop and stay. So let's keep going. Verse 23. At the commandment of Yahuwah, they rested in the tents, and at the commandment of Yahuwah, they journeyed. They kept the charge of Yahuwah at the commandment of Yahuwah by the hand of Moses. So again, just like Jania was saying, the Most High was training the children of Israel to stop when he said stop and go when he said go. And to get some of that hard-headedness out of us, because that's something that we have and had that we just, for whatever reason, just would not or could not shake. So the Most High had to literally, like a father, like a parent, beat it into us. So are there any questions in chapter 9 before we go into 10? Okay, let's go into chapter 10. And I did not forget the stuff that I had you guys highlight. We're actually going to get into that really quick. Chapter 10 and verse 1. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Make thee 2 trumpets of silver, of a whole piece shalt thou make them, that thou mayest use them for the calling of the assembly and for the journeying of the camps. And when they shall blow with them, all the assembly shall assemble themselves to thee at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And if they blow but with 1 trumpet, then the princes which are heads of the thousands of Israel shall gather themselves unto thee. Who remembers when we went over the princes before? When we talked about the princes of the children of Israel. Matter of fact, we read that in...
Weren't they like the leaders of the tribes?
Yes, they were the leaders. But I want you to notice a distinction right here. He says the princes who are the heads of the thousands of Israel. Let's go back to, and this is funny. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is something that I thought was, that I'm still believing is hilarious, that the Most High keeps taking me back there. Exodus chapter 18 and verse 21. For some reason, the Most High keeps taking me back to Jethro. And honestly, I believe that I have found out who Jethro was, what tribe he came from and everything. We're going to get into that. So Exodus chapter 18, verse 21. And it reads, and thou shalt not let any, wait a minute. That's not it. Why did I write that? I'm sorry, 18 and verse, well, oh, I'm in Leviticus. I'm like, that don't make sense. Exodus chapter 18 and verse 21. And it reads, moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear Elohim, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands and rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. So those princes are not just any of the leaders. They were the leaders of thousands. So you see that there's a breakdown. There's rulers of 10s, rulers of 50s, rulers of hundreds, and then there's rulers of thousands. The princes of Israel are the ones who are the rulers of thousands, meaning they were the ones who were over the entire tribes. Each tribe only had 1 prince. That's why we only saw 1 of them. So let's go back to Numbers chapter 1, and we're going to read verses 4 and verses 16. And I'm going to show you something that's very interesting. The scripture gives us these leaders by name. Numbers chapter 1, and we're going to read verse 4 and verse 16. And in your spare time, if you want to, you can read all those verses in between with all those names. Those names are tough. So Numbers chapter 1 and verse 4. It says, and with you, this is the Most High instructing Moses, and with you there should be a man of every tribe, 1 man of every tribe, every 1 head of the house of his fathers. And these are the names of the men that shall stand with you. Right? And from then on, he lists, the Most High gives the names of the men that he wants to be the leaders, because these are the ones that are already over those tribes. These are those names. So these are the princes of thousands that the Most High mentions in that the Most High gives Moses for in Numbers chapter 1 that we read about in Numbers chapter 10. Verse 16. These were the renowned of the congregation, princes of the tribes of their fathers, heads of thousands in Israel. So these are not just, it's not just anybody. These are all those men who are the princes of their fathers, meaning their forefathers were Reuben, Manasseh, Naphtali. They like direct descendants, not cousins, not married into the family. These are the direct descendants of Issachar and Naphtali and Zebulun. These are those guys. And the Most High gives you them by name. So we know all 12 of these guys. Well, it might be 11. Yeah, 11, because it doesn't mention Levi. So, okay, let's go back to Numbers. Yes. We're going to go back to Numbers chapter 10. And where do we stop? Verse 4. So the funny thing is, those same men that Moses, so when Jethro gave Moses the counsel on to how to set up those judges to rule over Israel in his stead to help him, those same men, out of that same group, the Most High chose he chose the leaders of each tribe to be the princes of Israel for Moses' sake. And you're going to see why he chooses them in a little while. Verse 5. When you blow an alarm, then the camps that lie on the east parts shall go forward. We're back in Numbers chapter 10, by the way. Verse 6. When you blow an alarm the second time, then the camps that lie on the south side shall take their journey. They shall blow an alarm for their journeys. But when the congregation is to be gathered together, you shall blow, but ye shall not sound an alarm. And the sons of Aaron, the priests, shall blow with the trumpets, and they shall be to you for an ordinance forever throughout your generations. Notice something in verse 8. It's an ordinance forever throughout your generations. Verse 9. And if ye go to war in your land against the enemy that oppresseth you, then ye shall blow an alarm with the trumpets, and ye shall be remembered before Yahweh your Elohim, and ye shall be saved from your enemies. Now this verse right here, this is awesome. This is something that's really dope. What is that verse foreshadowing of?
The coming of Christ is the day that he comes back.
The day that he comes, but we mean the Christ's return?
Yes.
Nope, not his return. It's something, you're close. You're close. Anybody else want to take a stab at it? What is that foreshadowing?
The Battle of Armageddon.
You said the Battle of Armageddon?
Yes.
So you guys are taking it literally. All right. You're not wrong. But you're still taking it literally. Miss Belinda, you're not wrong either. Even though I told you no, you're taking it literally because you guys are on the same page. This is something. All right, we'll do it this way. Let's go to Acts chapter 1, verse 4 through 6. Acts chapter 1, verses 4 through 6. Acts chapter 1, verse 4. And being assembled together with them, commanded them that they should not depart from Jerusalem, but wait for the promise of the Father, which saith he, ye have heard of me. For John truly baptized with water, but ye shall be baptized with the Holy Ghost not many days hence. When they therefore were come together, they asked of him, saying, Lord, or sovereign, wilt thou at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? Why did they ask Christ that question?
Because they knew it was in the book. They read it and they thought that was the time.
They read what? What do you mean?
They read that Christ would return, when he would come, that he would come.
That the
And
Messiah would come and restore the kingdom to Israel? Okay. Okay. Delise, what were you about to say?
I was going to say because Messiah said to wait for the promise of the Father, and the promise they were thinking of was the restoration of Israel.
I'm going to show you guys that it's actually deeper than that. I'm going to show you. And remember, the scripture, the verse that we're referring to is Numbers 10 and 9. And if ye go to war in your land against the enemy that oppresseth you, then ye shall blow an alarm with the trumpets, and ye shall be remembered before the Lord your God, and ye shall be saved from your enemies. Luke chapter 1, and we're going to start at verse 68. We're going to read to 71. Luke chapter 1, verse 68 through 71. And it reads, Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he hath visited and redeemed his people, and hath raised up an horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us. Does anybody see it yet? In the book of Acts, this is a conversation. It's the conversation is not taking place right now. This conversation is taking place. You're gonna have to ask Kendall and Haley. Okay. Go ahead. So this conversation is happening right here. It's one of the disciples is reflecting on the conversation that Christ had with just a crowd of Israelites. And the question that they asked him was that, will thou at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? It's not because they did not know the prophecies. And it's not because they read what Luke was saying or what Zacharias was saying in the book of Luke. First thing we got to understand is, in the book of Luke, who is Zacharias talking about in the part that we read?
Yahusha.
He's talking about Yahusha, right? So one of the things people say is that he's talking about his son, John the Baptist. But there are some clues in this, what Zacharias is talking about, that he's not mentioning John. He actually only talks about John in 2 verses, 76 and 77. So in verse 76, he says, and thou, child, he's talking about John. He's saying, and you, child, shalt be called the prophet of the highest, for thou shalt go before the face of the Lord, the sovereign, to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of salvation unto his people by the remission of their sins. That's what he's talking about, John the Baptist. Go back up into verse 69. And he says, and hath raised up an horn of salvation for us. John the Baptist is giving the knowledge of salvation that we see in verse 77. He's giving the knowledge of salvation. In 69, this person is the horn of salvation. Who is the horn of salvation that came out of the seed line of David?
Yahusha.
That's Yahusha. John the Baptist did not come out of the seed line of David. David came out of what seed line? Ultimately, we know Jesse and before that, but who ultimately did David come out of?
Besides Boaz and all that.
Yeah, besides all, even before Boaz. Which of the 12 patriarchs? Which tribe was David?
Judah.
He was Judah, right? So the horn of salvation that comes out of David has to be a Jew. He has to be from the tribe of Judah. What tribe was Zacharias from? Go ahead, say it, Celise.
He was from the tribe of Levi.
He was Levi. So John the Baptist had to be what? Levi. So this horn of salvation that comes out of David could not be John the Baptist.
So could be, I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
So since the horn is Yahusha, because it says from the line of David, and Yahusha came, well, besides just to give the good news and to turn the Yahuwah's people back to him, his laws and statutes, to seek repentance and all that. And in doing all of that, then the Most High would remember who they were and come and save his people from those that oppress them.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. So these people that we see in Acts that are asking these questions, that are talking to, who is this that's talking? I believe is this Paul? I mean, it's either Paul or Peter that's recalling this account. The people that are talking here, they don't know about the book of Luke yet. The book of Luke hasn't been written. It hasn't been scribed yet. So when we get to the book of Acts, they don't know this. They don't know about this conversation that happened here in Luke, that Luke is recording about Zacharias talking about the coming of Yahusha. They don't know about that yet. What they do know about is Numbers chapter 10 and verse 9. Because think about where they are. They are citizens. Where did Yahusha teach? Stop.
In Jerusalem.
In the land of Canaan. You're absolutely right. Did he ever leave the land of Canaan? Shh.
No.
So no, Christ never taught outside of the land of Canaan. The furthest that they record him going is to Tyre and Zidon, but those were both within the borders of Canaan. So the entire time that Christ was teaching, that Yahushua was teaching, he spoke all throughout the land of Canaan. Even when he was teaching in Jerusalem, who was ruling Jerusalem at the time when he walked around?
Was it the Greeks or the Romans?
It was the Romans.
Romans.
It was the Romans. Remember, they asked him, it's like, are you supposed to pay taxes? And he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. That was a Roman thing. So he was under Roman captivity at the time. So that means he was being oppressed in his land. He was in the land of Canaan, him and all the other Israelites at that time that were in that area. They were being oppressed in their land by the Romans at that time. So in Numbers 10 and verse 9, and if ye go to war in your land against the enemy that oppresseth you, then you shall blow an alarm with the trumpets. If Yahusha is the horn of salvation, the whole time he was there, like Jania just said, he was preaching and teaching repentance and salvation for the Jews, for the Israelites. That's what he was doing the whole time. So literally the horn was being blown. And those who understood, who had ears to hear, who understood what he was saying, that's why they asked that question. They said, wait a minute, are you now here to restore the kingdom to Israel? Is that what we're seeing? Are you making a war cry now? Are we about to go to war? This is what was happening. This is what was going on. It wasn't because what Luke said. It was because they knew Numbers 10 and 9. 1 second, please.
When you said that, that just reminded me of the scriptures in Isaiah and in the scriptures in Jeremiah, when he says, my people cry out loud. It's like a war cry.
Isaiah 58 and 1.
Mm-hmm. Cry out loud, and then, turn back, repent your sins, and then I'll fight for you. I'll fight for you again. When
Absolutely.
you're in that distress, I'll fight for you again, but you have to do these things first. Cry out loud, which he just says, when you go to war and in your land, if you think about it the same way, you need to sound the trumpets, cry out loud. And then I'll remember you and turn back. That's wow. Yeah. That's so true.